Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Hey gang, before I kick things off, I want to apologize about the last episode and one of the stories in it. As some listeners pointed out, it sounded a little familiar to them, and they believed it was kind of like the plot from a movie called The Parent Trap. To be honest, I've never seen that, and I still haven't looked it up in the last couple of days, but I'm going to take your word for it. As you know, I don't do any creepypasta on here, and I try to take everyone's word for it that the stories that they're sending or the ones that I read are truthful, and maybe I got taken on that one. My apologies. If the author is telling the truth, well, then I guess no harm, no foul. But if you're lying, not cool. I'll work to be more diligent as we roll forward, guys. And now, everybody sit back, relax, and enjoy some creepy encounters with some truly creepy people. Crazy Guy at My Grandparents', submitted by Ryan K. It's taken me a while to tell anybody about this, because it still kind of messes me up just talking about it. This happened back in the summer of 2013. I was 12 years old, and my parents had dropped me off at my grandparents' place out in rural Pennsylvania. They had a ton of land, just acres and acres of open fields that eventually turned into these super thick, heavy woods. Since I was an only child, I basically spent all day, every day, just wandering around out there, pushing my luck to see how far I could go before I got lost. I'll never forget, it was a Tuesday in July, and I remember because it was one of those miserable, sticky hot days where the cicadas are screaming so loud your ears ring. I found myself going deeper into the woods than I ever had before, past the point where I could see the clearing of the fields. The trees were really dense and the temperature actually dropped a bit. But I started smelling something weird too, like something dead was rotting nearby. And that's when I stumbled onto this random little clearing and saw a cabin. It looked really old, and the wood was totally blackened and rotting. The whole thing was kind of leaning to one side, and I was nervous, but when you're 12, curiosity usually wins out. So I walked up to the front door, and when I pushed on it, the wood groaned so loud, I almost bolted right there. I knocked on it and yelled, "Hello, is anybody there?" And there was nothing, just dead silence. As I say this right now, I look back and think, man, what a set of balls I had on me to walk right up and knock on the door. When no one answered, I just poked around on the side and then wiped some grease off a cracked window. I tried to see inside, but it was too dark in there. And finally, I went back to the front door and just grabbed the handle. The door wasn't locked. I pulled it open and I stepped inside, and the smell hit me first. It just smelled like something was rotting. I couldn't tell if it was plant life or flesh, maybe a mix of both. Once my eyes adjusted to the light, the first thing I noticed was a bunch of shelves on the wall that was packed with glass mason jars. I went over to look at them, and every single one of them was filled with a thick, nasty, dark, reddish-black liquid. And my stomach flipped when I looked at the labels that were on them. Someone had taped pieces of masking tape to the glass, and they were all yellowed and kind of falling apart. But I could see that there was crude writing on them in black markers. Things like cat, dog, deer, and then a really big one in the back that said cow. I froze, looking at the jars, and slowly realized it was all stored blood. Then I looked around the rest of the room, and in the corner there was a bare mattress just lying on the dirt floor. It had a filthy, stiff blanket on it that was covered in huge, dark brown stains. Nearby there were rusty hacksaws and skinning knives, and these heavy leather straps bolted straight into the wall. I lost my shit. The idea that some psycho was actively using this place hit me all at once like a bucket of water. All of this despite the place looking like no one had been there in months. I just turned around, sprinted out the door as fast as my legs could carry me, and tore through the briars and branches, not looking back once until I burst out of the trees and saw my grandfather's big red barn. I ran straight into the kitchen, crying hysterically, sweating my ass off and hyperventilating. My grandparents got me to calm down, and I told them about the blood jars and the mattress. They could tell I wasn't making it up, but my grandfather did mention that he wasn't aware of any cabin out there. He did call the police, and 2 state troopers came out a little while later. I walked all of them back to the edge of the woods and then pointed to the path I took. The troopers made us stay behind while they went to look further. An hour later, they came back out. They looked totally annoyed. They told my grandfather that they did find an old hunter's shack, but it was completely empty. There were no jars, mattresses, tools, there was nothing in there. One of the troopers looked at me and basically said the summer heat and a wild imagination can make a kid see things. Despite my protesting, my grandparents believed them, and after a little while, everyone dropped it, including me. But I knew the truth. I knew someone had seen me run away and cleaned out that cabin in the hour it took for the police to get there. But the scariest part? Well, that happened 2 weeks later. My grandparents had gone into town to get groceries, so I was home alone, just watching TV in the living room. I heard a loud, heavy thud on the front screen door, and I went to the window and saw a man standing there. On the porch was a tall, incredibly skinny guy. He was wearing a filthy flannel shirt, even though it was 85 degrees out. He looked like a total scumbag, to be honest with you. His eyes were bloodshot, and when he noticed that I was standing in the window, he looked right over at me. In this raspy voice, he asked if my grandfather was home, and I just shook my head no. I was kind of scared to speak. When he didn't leave right away, he just stood there staring at me for what felt like 10 minutes. Finally, he'd made this creepy smile, and he said, I'll be seeing you around. And then he turned and walked down the dirt road until he vanished. To this day, I am 100% convinced that that guy had something to do with that cabin. I think he was watching me the whole time I was in that shack. For years after that, every single time the house creaked at night, I would lie awake in absolute terror, convinced that guy was coming back to get me, and that my name was going to be the next label written on one of those jars. My grandparents eventually sold the land to the state, and that was some years ago. The last time I was back there was right after COVID, and I took an exploratory stroll out to see if I could find that cabin. But anything that was there was just a pile of ruins. To this day, I still wonder where that guy is. Never shared this story, never thought anyone would believe me. By Decent Specific. I finally want to share what happened to me probably a little over 10 years ago. I was physically attacked by a crazy older couple who had drugged and violated my sister. My sister called me and the rest of my immediate family, including my dad from another neighborhood, myself, my mom, and my brother who all lived with my sister, who had recently been hired as a server by these people. The call came in the middle of the night and she was begging us for help. When we all received these separate, desperate, hysterical phone calls, we could all tell she was under the influence of something, and we arrived at the pizza shop hours after it had closed to get her. The man who owned the place unlocked the door and let us in. Right away, my sister was completely belligerent, and the older couple who owned the restaurant were visibly intoxicated, but trying to convince her to get off the floor and just leave with us. My sister was acting insane and resisting us, and while we were trying to get control of her, out of left field, the older woman grabbed me by my hair and started a brawl. Mind you, none of us at this time had shown any aggression towards these people before the woman attacked me. I couldn't get her off me. My mom was now on her trying to get her off me, and I was pleading with her to please let me go, saying that we were going to be here all night if she kept this up. I could barely breathe, and I was tired, so I pushed my fingernails into her face, but it didn't stop her at all. My dad and the male owner by this time had started scuffling on the other side of the restaurant, so my brother ran outside to call the cops, and when they showed up, we all went out to the sidewalk to talk to them. They checked out the condition of my sister, who was now rolling in piles of garbage bags on the curb like a dying animal, but they didn't call an ambulance. They didn't offer to take any official statement from any of us. We told them exactly what had happened and why we were all there. And they accused us of showing up in a gang to beat the two older people up. They threatened to arrest us for trespassing, even though the predatory couple were the ones that had unlocked the doors to the restaurant for us to come in and get my sister. That was the exact moment I realized that some cops are useless. I'd been so relieved to see them arrive. After 15 minutes of this woman holding on to my hair, I thought the good guys were there to save us all. But instead of helping, they accused us of instigating the fight. They saw that the older woman had marks on her face that I had made while trying to push her away from me, and they claimed that that proved I was the aggressor. Meanwhile, they didn't say anything about me combing my hair with my fingers and removing what she had detached from my scalp. I was then asked if I wanted to press charges, and I said yes. But the cops then told me that if that was my final decision, they were going to arrest me and my whole family instead. I considered it for a few seconds and looked at all my family's faces. Their faces all seemed to be pleading to just forget it. So I did. We went home, and the violent predators faced no consequences. Years later, I finally overheard my sister discussing some of the details of what she remembered the couple doing with her in the basement in the restaurant that night, and it was extremely graphic and disturbing. After this incident, I was in shock for a while, and I was in a very poor mental state for months. There wasn't anything I could do about any of it, and I realized that, no one was looking out for us. We were all unsafe in that city. The two cops that changed my entire outlook on law enforcement that night, by the way, were from the 111th Precinct in Queens. Milk, It Doesn't Do a Body Good. Submitted by Angel of the Night Alley. Back when I was 22, I was working this god-awful graveyard shift at a 24-hour gas station and convenience store to help me pay for college. This wasn't one of those big, brightly lit corporate chains like Wawa or 7-Eleven. This was a tiny, family-owned mom-and-pop shop in a completely isolated small town. The owners, Mr. and Mrs. B, were absolute neat freaks. They were obsessed with cleanliness, and they'd lose their minds if there was even a smudge on the glass doors. So, I spent half of my shift scrubbing everything down. The funny thing is because it was so clean, it actually felt relatively safe. Until the night I'm about to tell you. It was around 1 a.m., dead quiet, and the door chimed. In walked this guy. He looked totally ordinary at first glance, mid-20s, jeans, a plain jacket, but his energy was just off. He didn't look at me or say hi, he just walked straight to the back coolers, grabbed a half-gallon of whole milk, walked to the register, and slapped down a $5 bill. I gave him his change, he took the jug, and before he'd even finished walking into the parking lot, he started pounding the entire thing. He didn't go to a car, he just stood there in the middle of the lot, in full view of the lights of the store. I just watched him unscrew that cap, and he started chugging. I'm not talking drinking it, he was pouring it down his throat like he was dying of thirst. It couldn't have been more than a minute before the entire half-gallon was gone. And then he stood there for a few seconds. And then his shoulders convulsed, and he violently projectile vomited the entire thing onto the pavement. It was the sickest thing I'd ever seen, just a massive pale puddle splashing under the light. The grossest part was, he didn't even wipe his mouth or look bothered about it. He just wiped his hands on his jeans, threw the jug into the trash, and walked away into the darkness. I knew Mr. G would have murdered me if he came in and saw the mess in the morning, so I grabbed the store hose, walked out into the night, and then spent 10 minutes spraying the milky residue into the drain. It was really gross doing it, but I figured this guy was maybe some blackout drunk doing weird drunk stuff. About an hour later, a little after 2, the door chimed again. I looked up, and there he was again. The same guy, same blank expression, same no greeting. He just walked back to the cooler, grabbed another half-gallon of milk and brought it to the counter. I was too weirded out to say anything, so I just scanned it and took his money. He grabbed the jug and walked right back to almost the exact same spot he had been before and did it again. He chugged the whole thing and immediately violently threw it up right where I had just hosed the ground off. Then he once again tossed the jug into the trash and walked off. At that point, I felt there was something deeply wrong. I mean, this wasn't drunk behavior. This felt like some weird ritual he was going through. I went out and quickly hosed the pavement down a second time, and hoped to God the rest of the night was going to be normal. At 3 a.m., the chime rang again. This time when he stepped inside, I didn't let him go back to the coolers. I stood behind the counter and said, "Hey man, you need to leave. I'm not selling you any more milk. Just get out." He stopped in his tracks, and for the first time he actually looked right at me, and I thought, man, have I made a bad decision here. He walked up to the counter, leaned over a little bit, and just smiled at me, and said, "Hey, my name's Charles. Do you want to go out with me sometime?" I didn't know what to say at first, but finally said, "No, I don't. Please leave or I'm calling the cops." He didn't get mad at me. He just smiled at me and nodded, and then turned around and walked out of the store. I wasn't taking any chances. I locked the front door immediately. I started walking up and down the aisles, not knowing what to do with myself, just counting down the minutes until my shift ended at 6. But at 30 minutes later, there was a loud, heavy thud against the front glass door. It took me by surprise, so I screamed and looked over, and there was Charles outside, pressing his hands and face against the glass. But he wasn't the same. He was absolutely covered in blood. It was smeared all over his face. It was soaked onto his clothes. He started frantically banging on the glass, leaving these dark red smears all over the clean window. He kept saying, "Please, help me, someone's trying to hurt me, let me in, please." Every instinct I had told me he was lying, and it didn't look like the blood was his. If I opened that door, I knew I was in trouble, so I had to think fast because he looked like he was about to smash the glass. I don't know where I got the thought, but it suddenly popped into my head, and I yelled to him, "Charles, stay right there. I can't find the door keys. I'll look for them in the back. I think I dropped them. I'm going to call an ambulance for you right now. Just stay out there where they can see you, Charles." Something miraculous happened. He actually believed me. He stopped banging and just nodded and stepped back into the parking lot and started pacing around under the lights. I got to the phone and called 911, told the dispatcher everything, and kept my eyes on him. Within less than 5 minutes, a police cruiser tore into the parking lot with the sirens off but the lights flashing. They got out, and Charles didn't even fight. He just dropped to his knees, and to my horror, started laughing. As they loaded him into the back of a cruiser, one of the officers came inside to take my statement, so I unlocked the door. I was shaking so badly I could barely speak. The cop looked at me and then said that they'd already been out looking for Charles. He hadn't been attacked. Sometime between his second and last visit, he had been at his house and brutally beaten his girlfriend and left her for dead in their apartment. He'd wandered around town covered in her blood and then used the convenience store and me as some kind of pit stop. I never saw Charles again. I finished my degree and a few months later moved across the country. My parents have since retired and relocated, and all my college and high school friends also scattered over the years. I haven't been back to that town since, and honestly, I don't plan on ever going back. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you're catching this on YouTube and you like what you heard and saw, why not give the video a thumbs up, share it with a friend, leave a comment. I'd love to know what you thought of the stories. It's all free and it all helps out with the algorithms, so I appreciate it. Follow me on social media, and if you'd like to take your support a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description and consider getting some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is also in the description. Everyone, be excellent to each other, and until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything: a ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.